Happy New Year from Piano Spun Fiber Arts. My name is Jess, and in this video I am going to be creating a crocheted cardigan entirely from hand spun yarn, so 25 different hand spun yarns. If you want to see the creation of all those yarns, you can watch my 2025 Advent Spin Along playlist, but today we're going to take all those squares that I made and we're going to turn them into a really cute cardigan. So let's jump in. First of all, I have to take all of these squares that I have knit throughout the year and I have to seam them all together. So I've chosen to use this yarn right here. You can see that it says I have 317 grams of McMurray merino here, and McMurray just happens to be the farm that I got this merino fleece from. This is entirely hand spun. This was like a deep brown Morit merino fleece that I spun into this 2-ply yarn, which at some spots does seem to be pretty much Aran weight, might be a little thin in other spots, but I think this is going to be my edge and my cuffs and my hem. So that's my plan for this yarn. I'm also going to use it to seam it all together because I have plenty of it. So let's just jump right in. Let's get this thing sewn together. So apparently I got way ahead of myself, and before I can start seaming together any of these squares, I need to go back and finish them all correctly. So initially I had just done that sort of knot and go that you do the first time you learn to crochet. So all of my squares have these extra ends that I need to weave in and cut off. Now that center, that initial end of yarn, I had looped that many times around that initial train circle, so I feel pretty comfortable just cutting those. But as far as finishing up the edges go, I didn't like that just knotted end look. I didn't think it finished the square. So I went back and I found this really great tutorial. I will post the picture right up here. And this finished my squares beautifully. It made them all seamless. It made the stitch count equal on every side. And honestly, if I hadn't done this, I think I would have gone into a lot of troubles when I tried to seam the coat at the end. This actually wasn't that annoying. I know that I talked a lot about how much weaving in all these ends was going to take up my time, but I had a good time weaving in all these ends. It was nice to kind of go through all of the colors throughout the coat, and it ended up being really satisfying to see them all finish up perfect and seamless and with an equal stitch count on every side. So this is me finishing up every color in order from day 1 all the way through day 25, but of course there were multiple copies of each of these colors. In case you didn't see before, the pattern that I'm gonna be making with these squares is called the Never Off Cardigan by CJ Design. It was originally named for Wool Ease yarn, and it's just this really comfy, cozy, puff stitch granny square cardigan. So this is what we're going for in the end with all of these granny squares. So something that worked out pretty perfectly is the back panel of this coat design is exactly 5 by 5 squares, and that's just the whole back panel. So I realized that I had to do them in calendar order since we have this neat little 5 by 5 section for all 25 days. Now, I make a mistake here lying out the green, so I'm just gonna fast forward through that. It took me way too long to recognize that mistake when I initially shifted that green, but here are all 25 stays starting in that top left corner with day 1. And here is what that final layout looks like. I went kind of random other than the back of the coat, but over here we're looking at the right sleeve, and then we move on to that right shoulder panel. This would be that left front panel, and this would be the left sleeve. I tried to just space all the colors out so that they're not next to each other once the coat is complete. And now we can finally get to seaming. So I had so much help from the YouTube kind of fiber arts and craft community with this. And for the seaming, I found a really great tutorial by Me Mom Makes about how to create these really beautiful seams on crocheted granny squares. And she gave the suggestion that we start by safety pinning all of the squares in order where we want them. And that was actually more annoying than the initial finishing of all the squares. But her tutorial is a mattress stitch. It creates an invisible mattress stitch between the squares, and I just thought the final product looked so cute. I had to modify it a little bit because her granny squares had 2 chains in each corner and mine have 3. And in the end, I just skipped that middle chain. I tried to kind of use the first 2, and then on other squares, I would use the second 2, and it was coming out uneven. So I just skipped that middle chain altogether, and it helped me get this really clean and seamless look. Now what I'm doing here is I'm first seaming across all of the horizontal rows, and I'm just showing one here, and then I will go back and seam through all of the vertical rows. So as I finish up this first row here, you can see that we're really getting a nice seam between all of those vertical squares. And then at the end of the row, I'm just gonna finish it off with a knot. This is going to leave me with lots of ends to weave in later, which I thought I was done with that, but I guess I am not. And here I'm just finishing up that final row, the horizontal row. It kind of looks like everything is already seamed together, and they kind of lightly are right at the corners, but mostly this seam is being done across those horizontal rows, and I'm going to have to go back and finish up those vertical columns so that they stay nice and tight together. So now I'm just turning my work. I'm going to start on those vertical columns, and this will make sure that it stays as one complete panel. So now we have that finished, clean back panel, and off camera I went ahead and seamed up the rest of the panels as well. So here is our right shoulder and front, our left shoulder and front, our left sleeve, and our right sleeve. At this point, I have to seam together all of these panels so that we have one big cardigan piece. Seaming together these panels was really nice because at this point it really starts to feel like a cardigan. It's cool to look at how all those colors come together and to start imagining how it really is going to look like as a coat, and how nicely those squares are lining up. They look really clean and crisp. I'm glad that I went through the extra time to make sure that I'm doing this correctly, because I'm really, really happy with the end result. So here you're gonna see me seaming on the rest of these panels. One issue I always knew there might be with this cardigan is size. I noticed that all of the other completed versions of this cardigan were all that medium size, and I'm doing small because I knew that I wouldn't have enough handspun to make any other size. But as I'm starting to seam on these sleeves, I'm really starting to get scared that the sleeves are going to be much too short for me and that I might have to change my plan from the original pattern.
So I am at the point in the project where I have seamed everything together that was asked of the initial pattern. You can kind of see when it's folded in half what that cardigan is going to look like. And I was able to kind of try it on for the first time. And we've hit a bit of a snag. So I always knew that it was gonna be a little small, and it's definitely gonna fit me different than the oversized version from the pattern description. But the sleeves are just so short, too short to really work with. So I have a couple options here. Number one, I can just leave the sleeve short and not add ribbing and just make it like a tee cardigan. I'm not gonna do that one. I could, on the sleeves, just add a bunch of like traditional granny square stitches to make up for that lost area. I don't really wanna do that either. I worked too hard on this to have it look different than I want it to. So I think for me, I gotta make 8 more squares. I have to make another row of squares for both sleeves, and both sleeves are 4 squares across. So I gotta make 8 of them. And again, I have some options here. I could make 8 squares out of the yarn that I'm using for the edging. I have plenty of it, but I don't wanna do that. I think it would look odd to me to have this jacket full of all these beautiful colors and then right at the end have like just another row of gray squares on the sleeves. That just doesn't sit well with me. I had a suggestion in the comments earlier that suggested that I use the scraps and make like multicolored squares that have, you know, one color as that kind of star in the middle and then another color for each of the rows on the outside. But I don't want to do that either, because again, it'll be different right at the edge of the sleeves. Like I'll have these beautiful color blocks and then right at the end of the sleeves, it'll be different. And I don't want that either. So I'm still gonna save these for the project I had in mind. And I think I just gotta bite the bullet and spin some more yarn from the calendar and make some more squares. So I have 2 left over already. One is something fishy and the other is that gift of gold. And I'm going to use these 2 and I gotta spin 6 more. So I'm gonna choose some colors to spin 6 more with. I didn't discuss this at the time that I was going through the calendar, but my calendar actually arrived with a defect. I opened the calendar initially and I had 2 day 17s and no day 16. So I actually have an extra day 17 Puro Bang Bang. World of Wool was incredible about it. I reached out to them and they overnighted package 16 to me. So everything worked out for the calendar itself. It was not an issue. They took care of it immediately. But I do have this extra bag. So I'm gonna spin 2 of these, 1 for each sleeve, since I have so much extra. That gets us up to 4. So then I just had to choose 4 colors that aren't gonna make it to that secondary project. And number 1, I chose something fishy. I will have 1 of these on each sleeve. Partially because I don't mind it not being in the second project, but mostly because the second project is going to be fingering weight yarns. and I just don't want to deal with spinning this fingering weight, so that kind of works out. I also chose some of the neutrals that I'm less kind of worried about losing. So I chose day 16, the Panettone. I chose day 7, boil and mash them, stick them in the stew, that kind of like almost yellowy cream color. And then the last one, I had some trouble deciding between which one I wanted. I didn't want to go with any of those really luxury, nice fibers. I want to have the experience of spinning them fingering weight. I think that'll be really nice. So I chose just a nice neutral to spin as another Aran weight yarn. I chose day 9 knack. So I have got to get to spinning. So I'm gonna go do that. And I think after I spin another round, it'll still be a little short. If you saw how short those sleeves were, it'll still be a little short. So I think after another round of squares, I'm gonna go in with the yarn that I have, and I'm gonna do a row just copying the stitch pattern on the top layer of the square. So I'm gonna do a row all around the sleeve that is half double crochets and puff stitches, and that'll help it blend in a little. It'll give me about an extra inch, and then I can start the ribbing like the pattern calls for, and I think that'll be just right. My version of the cardigan is gonna be a little more cropped than the version from the pattern. I think that's fine. It still is gonna fit really cute. It's just the sleeves. So I'm gonna get to spinning, I guess. See you soon.
So I did spin up those 5 other yarns and crochet all those squares. I don't have any footage of it because I did it mostly within like 3 hours. I just went on a rampage about it. I did the spinning pretty quickly, and then I knit the squares at a friend's house while playing D&D. So I don't have any recording of it, but it's all the same colors from the calendar, so you have seen them before. I went ahead and seamed them up in the same evening. I did it all really quickly at that D&D session. I was so proud of myself. I got them attached to the coat, and now I'm going back in and I folded that coat in half and I am seaming up the whole thing. So after this, we will get to actually definitively see how it fits without any additional hem or cuff. So I'm gonna finish up this. Okay, so at this point, I have spun that extra yarn. I turned it into squares, and I was able to seam up the whole jacket. So it fits way better at this point. I'm still gonna do a little bit of changes just to make it fit even better, but the sleeves are much closer to my sleeve length. And in general, we're looking way more jacket-like. So all that is left, I mean, besides weaving in all these ends, is our finishing, our cuff, our edges, and our bottom ribbing. I am going to make a change here. So initially, I was going to crochet all of that with this yarn, which is made from a merino from McMurray Farm. But this is what I use to do all my seaming. Unfortunately, I think this yarn is just too different from what's already in the coat. It is the color I want. I think it would work well with the whole coat.
but it's 2-ply and it's too thin. So I think I'm gonna have to change up my yarn. I wanna make sure it comes from my hand spun stash. That's important to me when it comes to this particular jacket. I don't want something that's too colorful. I have some really nice 3-ply Aranish weight yarns. I have some in dark blue and I have some in marled white and black, which came from a multicolored Cordell sheep. But I think I'm just gonna go white. And I didn't want to do this initially because I think it's too bright against the rest of the coat. But I think it's gonna be okay. So I'm gonna go in instead with this 3-ply Cormo. It's much closer to the weight that we're looking for. Still a little thin, but much closer, and it is that 3-ply. And this is going to create cuffs, edges, anything else that we need on the coat is going to be in white. I am gonna add a little bit more than the original pattern calls for, so I'm gonna go around. Before I start any of the ribbing called for in the pattern, I'm gonna add another round of double crochets and puff stitches. I just have to make sure that when I do that, I end up with the same stuff that I had before. So I think when I come across where our granny squares meet, I think I'm gonna do puff stitch, chain space, puff stitch, chain stitch, space, puff stitch. So I'll have 3, and then I'll end up with the same kind of chain spaces, and then I'll just crochet, double crochet all the double crochets, and I think that'll work out. We'll get another inch or so around our cuffs before we do our ribbing, and I'm gonna do the same thing around the front and on the bottom of the jacket. I do want to take a second and just kind of complain, I guess, about the pattern here. I had said in the very beginning, before I even started Advent this year, that the pattern I had only ever seen made in the medium size. All of the finished projects on Ravelry are all only in the medium size. And that is starting to make a whole lot of sense because this jacket doesn't really scale well. I mean, I'm gonna make it work for my purposes. I'm not too far from the small size in general, so this should have been pretty close to my actual size. It obviously fits me way more cropped, but I'm really thinking about the sleeves if you're anything but medium, because this coat, the way it sizes up, is simply by making the squares bigger. So when you make this coat bigger, it gets bigger in all dimensions equally, kind of like a hexi-cardi, except you don't have control over the sleeves at the end. So in the initial pattern, the wingspan of this coat, so from cuff to cuff, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 squares long initially. Now, my wingspan from cuff to cuff, if I can hold it that way, oops, so I'll just go a little shorter than what it says. My wingspan is about, let's say, 53 inches, or just over 4 feet. The squares for the small size are meant to be 4 inches across, which means in the small size, you would have gotten a final wingspan of 44 inches. Obviously too small, about a foot too small actually. But when you do the medium size, you get a final wingspan, because those squares are meant to be 5 inches across, a final wingspan of 55 inches, which is almost exactly perfect. But this is where it gets kind of crazy, because if you made the large at 6 inches per square, now your jacket is 66 inches across, or nearly 5 feet, if you make the extra large version of this jacket, your final wingspan is 77 inches across, or over 6 feet. Over 6 feet of that final wingspan, 6.5 feet nearly, if you make the extra large version of this coat. And that's just not how garments scale. The wingspan of a person doesn't change much depending on your size. You don't grow, your arms don't physically grow out. So this garment really is kind of meant to be medium. The other sizes, you can definitely tailor them to your needs, like I did by adding the extra row of sleeves. You might have to remove a row if you're making the larger size of the jacket. Again, it's also gonna scale down this way. That largest size is gonna be, you know, almost 4 feet down from your shoulder. So if you plan on making this, just be aware that you might have to do some alterations of your own to make it work for you if you're not making that kind of initial size. So there's that. I've got a lot of crocheting to do, so I'm gonna get working on that. Okay, it's a couple hours later and I have changed my mind again. So I started to crochet with this. This is the Cormo that I showed earlier. Very, very beautiful yarn, but unfortunately a little too thin and a little too bright. It wasn't looking right with the rest of the colors on the jacket. So I did have a little bit of this Aran Weights. This was just a sample skein. It's Santorini, I think. It is an Aran Weight merino. And you can see next to each other how much more mellow and kind of creamy this is. This is a natural Cormo fleece. That's what this is from. I processed the fleece myself, and it is just insane how bright white this is. So this was way better. I also have a yarn that is similar in color profile, but is a different weight and has different yarn in it. I think this is part merino and part mulberry silk, but they do have the same color profile. So I started following the pattern and I just did that first round of single crochet on the cuff, and this looks so cute that I went ahead and I ran away with myself and I did it on the whole jacket. So the whole jacket, I gave this single crochet kind of edge finishing. And I think at this point, I'm going to leave the pattern where it is, and I'm gonna kind of go off on my own thing. Because after finishing the edge of the sleeve like this, I decided that the sleeve is actually really cute, open and kind of big. Actually, if anything, I wanna make the sleeve bigger instead of cinching it smaller. So I'm going in a different style direction with this jacket. I think a little more boho cute. So on the lapel is what I'm gonna call this area, I need a lot more space. It closes to about here. So I need to create some width there. And the original pattern did that with ribbing. I don't like crochet ribbing. I don't like the look of it or the time. So instead, I'm gonna do a linen stitch on this front panel here. So all the way around the neck, it'll kind of create a collar. I'm not gonna decrease any in the corners. I'm just gonna let it build up and become a sort of collar. And I'll just keep doing that until it feels right, fit-wise. And then I'm gonna find some kind of crochet edging, something a little bit lacy. And I'm gonna add that in the mulberry silk, which is a little bit thinner. I'm gonna add that to the sleeves and to the bottom. So this is gonna be way more folksy cutesy than the original pattern. And I think I'm gonna like how that turns out. So let's get to work.
So here I'm just following up with that linen stitch. The linen stitch is really easy. It's just a single crochet and then a chain and skip a space and then single crochet and chain. And as you go back and forth during each row, you're just going to single crochet into the spaces that you missed and create a chain space again. So here I'm just adding those first 2 rows of the linen stitch, and as I crochet, I'm just gonna crochet a couple rows, try it on, crochet a couple rows until it feels right.
Okay, so at this point I have finished up the linen stitch on that kind of collar and center section. I just kept going. I tried it on every few rows until it felt about right, and this is where we ended up. I think it looks really cute. I also went ahead and weaved in all the ends, which was the most tedious part of the whole process. Weaving in the ends from the seaming was way worse than doing the seaming in general, but that is all now finished. And if I'm honest, I could be done at this point. It fits pretty croppy. It's really, really cute. It turned out a totally different style than the original pattern, but I'm happy with the way it turned out. I think it's actually cuter. But I don't think I'm quite done. I want to add something just a little whimsical, a little cottagey, since that's how this came out, kind of cute and cottagey. I want to finish it up with something a little more cutesy. So I found on Interweave this stitch called the V-shell border, and I'm gonna go ahead and add this to the cuffs and to the bottom hem. I have this much yarn left of that Aran weight merino, and I'm just going off of positive vibes that this is gonna be enough. If it's not, I'll probably tear it out and redo it in the DK weight with the silk in it, but I'm just hoping that this will be enough. My kind of initial just look is that it will be, but we shall see. So I'm gonna get started on this V-stitch shell border on the cuffs and the hem.
The V-stitch ended up being such a good idea. You can see me looking up crochet terms on the side here because, again, I don't crochet a lot, and often what happens is I'll just forget crochet terms. They don't stick the way that knitting terms do. Like every time I have to do a double crochet, I will relook it up because I don't remember how to do it. But this started by just creating some gaps, those little V stitches. So it's just double crochet, chain, and then make a little gap. And then after that was done, you'll see that I go around here and now I just double crochet into those gaps to create these really cute scalloped edges. And I think this was the correct idea. As this is building up, it's looking a little lacy, it's adding a little length, and it's just giving me the vibe that I was hoping for.
So here we are. This is the finished jacket with that crocheted V scallop edge on both cuffs as well as on the entire bottom hem. I actually went back through after I finished. This had another scallop right here, but when wearing it, it kind of puffed out a little bit strangely. So I went back and I removed that extra scallop. So now the edges, they're not completely identical, but they hang very nicely. And she is finally complete. I'm gonna go give her a little bit of a steam, and then I will be back to talk about everything that I learned this year and how I think it went. This is how much yarn was left of that Aran weight merino. So plenty, we made out just fine there. And I didn't even have to open that DK weight mulberry silk. So we made out like bandits. It looks so good. I am so beyond thrilled with the way that this project turned out. It looks even better than I imagined the original pattern looking when it was done, when I started this project. but I think the small changes that I made and just the way that it fits, I just think it's so much cuter. I love this style a lot. I love that we kind of got this crop fit with these cute little lacy details. And I think in the end, going with this cream color instead of my original plan for this gray color turned out to be a really, really good idea. It matches just so many of the colors we had in the sweater this year. We had so many tans and light browns that I think cream just matches better. And it's almost a color match for that potato day. If I could find a boil 'em, mash 'em, stick 'em in a stew spot. So not quite. The boil 'em, mash 'em, stick 'em in a stew was a little bit deeper in color, but very similar. I think the vibes are just right, and this is a much more wearable, everyday kind of cardigan than the one I made 2 years ago, which is still beautiful, don't get me wrong. I love the colorwork coat, but this one I can easily wear to school, and I don't think anyone is gonna say, you know, a word about it, because it's just really, really cute. It looks like something that's a little bit more in fashion and a little bit more everyday wearable. I had a lot of fun doing crochet this year. I think it's a surprise to some people when I say this, but crochet actually was my initial fiber art. I learned to crochet first before I learned to knit. My mom was a crocheter, and I didn't learn to knit until high school. Even though I mostly knit and spin now, crochet is my first fiber art. So it was nice to go back and nice to have more appreciation for crochet. For many years, especially in college, I had this feeling that crochet was kind of like old school, fuddy-duddy, like it kind of had this 70s nostalgic vibe. And I guess it still does in a way, but that's kind of cool and in now. And there's so many innovations in crochet that I think I'm going to start crocheting a lot more. I already have a bunch of projects lined up that I think are super cute that would be fun to crochet. I just need to remember that I'm gonna need so much more yarn, which is kind of good. It might be a good way to kind of work through my stash. So if you have been here all of Advent, thank you so much. If you're just here to see the handspun jacket, welcome. If you want to see how each of these yarns was created and the story behind them, you can check out the 2025 Advent Spin Along playlist. If you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing for way more fiber art based content. I am a fiber artist in every sense of the word, and my goal for 2026 is to really expand my fiber art vocabulary. That includes with crochet and knitting and spinning, things I've never tried like weaving, and even kind of pushing the boundaries of what a fiber even is. So if those things are interesting to you, I hope you'll come along for 2026 and beyond. Happy New Year. I have been Piano Spun Fiber Arts, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.